How generational trauma shapes Indigenous communities and paths to healing. Explore how multi-generational trauma impacts Indigenous populations and discover tools like the generational algorithm to help break cycles of inherited pain. Understanding generational trauma in Indigenous populations. When we talk about the history and experiences of Indigenous peoples, there's a topic that's essential to understand, but doesn't always get the attention it deserves: generational trauma. It's not just about events that happened long ago. It's about how those events ripple through families and communities, affecting health, identity, and overall well-being even today. Think about this. Trauma passed down from one generation to the next isn't just stories told at family dinners. We're talking about intergenerational trauma, or sometimes called ancestral trauma or family trauma. It's like an inherited burden that can shape a person's mental and emotional health, often without their full awareness. For Indigenous communities, this multi-generational trauma stems from a history filled with displacement, forced assimilation, cultural loss, and systemic abuse. Institutions like residential schools in the U.S. and Canada tried to erase Indigenous identities and languages, separating families and harming children physically and emotionally. The consequences of those actions didn't just vanish when the schools closed. They continued to affect survivors and their descendants. This is why terms like inherited trauma or transgenerational trauma show up in research on Indigenous mental health. It's not just theoretical. You see it in real life. Many Indigenous individuals and families face higher rates of depression, addiction, and PTSD. What's caused by decades, even centuries, of disrupted cultural connections and ongoing marginalization. The trauma isn't ancient history. It's alive in families today, expressed through behaviors, struggles, and patterns that are hard to break. But here's the hopeful part. Understanding this cycle opens the door to healing. One resource that really helped me frame these ideas is a book called The Generational Algorithm. This book offers insight into how emotional patterns pass through generations and how we can consciously rewrite those scripts to create healthier family dynamics going forward. If you're curious about approaches to overcoming multi-generational trauma, it's a powerful read to consider. Buy now on Amazon and start learning how to shift those inherited patterns. Healing in Indigenous communities often comes not only from professional help, but by reconnecting with cultural roots, traditions, and languages that colonial powers tried to suppress. Embracing Indigenous identity, engaging in community ceremonies, and passing on cultural knowledge serve as a form of resistance and recovery against the long shadows cast by trauma. Talking openly about family and ancestral trauma is difficult, sure, but it's necessary. It breaks the silence that can make trauma feel like a secret or a burden. When individuals recognize that their struggles are linked to a larger historical context, they can find compassion for themselves and others. In the end, recognizing the impact of multi-generational trauma in Indigenous populations helps us see why supporting Indigenous voices and their healing journeys is crucial. It's about more than just the past. It's about shaping a healthier future out of the pain and resilience of generations before. Generational trauma affects mental health and community well-being. Historical events like forced relocation and residential schools contribute to inherited trauma. Healing involves acknowledging trauma and reconnecting with culture. The generational algorithm offers tools to address and change emotional patterns across generations. If you want to better understand these ideas or are interested in healing your own family trauma, I highly recommend checking out The Generational Algorithm. It's a great step toward rewriting the stories we inherit and fostering stronger, healthier futures.